a beautiful scene that struck me as a child. When I was around 10 years old, my family moved from a certain part of a small southern town, 12,000 people or so, out to the edge of town. And below the house, there was an incline to a small creek, and across the creek, a meadow. I saw the meadow first in springtime, in the morning in May. And the field was covered with lilies, and there were crickets there, and butterflies. There were woodlands in the background, woodlands that extended for extensive way. That scene is something that I, of course, did not reflect on fully at that period in my childhood, but it stuck with me, has stuck with me all my life, and somehow deep in my unconscious I've brooded over that scene. And I've come to a kind of an awareness that that experience of the meadow has conditioned all my thinking. That is a good economics that is integral with the functioning of the meadow. And economics that violates the meadow is, to me, not a good economics. A good politics is what preserves that meadow and enables it to be protected from excessive intrusion or devastation by humans. That is a good religion that gives me some appreciation of the depth of meaning and the mystery of the meadow. That is a good education that reveals to me, enables that meadow to speak to me or to give me an understanding and a sense of the poetry of the meadow. I consider maybe the greatest blessing of my childhood to be a member of a family of 13 children, 10 children younger than I, and people say, my goodness, your mother must have an awful challenging time. But then I tell her she was out playing bridge 3 days a week. So when some of them were sick with a little flu, and I was in the room, there were 4 or 5 of them down sick, and she came in to me and said, you take care of them, I'll go down and play cards. She was the best card player in the area. I tell people that we felt secure at home because something happened to my father. My mother could support us playing cards. But that's not all. My mother was once elected as while she raised 13 children, she ran some international women's organization, the Altrusa Club, I remember. So she was somewhat on the a person of broad interests and so forth. And anyway, she got some awards in New York at one time. And she went to New York and got a certain amount of celebration and all that. And my one of the reporters was talking to my brother of Francis, and he had just finished medical school, and he was in York, and the reporter wanted to know how we were raised. My mother, whenever she was asked that question, said, "How did I raise my children?" With a lot of healthy neglect. And so my brother Frank, he was asked, did you have to be in a special time of night and all that? And he says, the old man might want us home. I'll come in by 11 if you can make it. But the porter pressed him and said, "What would you do if you came home and the door was locked?" "Oh," he said, "no big deal. I just sit on the doorstep till Mama came home." The great work of our times, briefly stated, is to move from a terminal Cenozoic period in the geobiological, cultural story of the planet Earth to the Ecozoic era. It's somewhat important that we understand where we are in relation to the deeper movements and shaping of the planet Earth and its biological, geological, and biological systems, because that is where the problem is at the present time. We're not in another period of historical change for humans or cultural modifications. If that were our problem, well, we would have a certain continuity with things that have happened previously in the human story. But what's happening now has no parallel in human history, nor does it have a parallel in the planet's history. This is, by all odds, a most unique moment in the 4.5 billion years of Earth history. So we are determining the destinies of the planet itself, and that is a rather momentous thing. I sometimes use these 3 sentences to describe our situation. I say that in the 20th century, these are my 3 sentences of describing our situation. In the 20th century, the glory of the human has become the desolation of the earth. Second sentence, the desolation of the earth is becoming the destiny of the human. Third sentence, all human institutions, professions, programs, and activities must now be judged primarily by the extent to which they inhibit, ignore, or foster a mutually enhancing human-earth relationship. If this is not achieved, everything else is irrelevant. So that there isn't a question of multiple choices about what we are about, what the objective of education must be. It's why a person has to question whether our universities have any sense at all of what they should be doing. Our universities are a disaster, pure and simple, because they are training people to disintegrate the planet. That's why I say the planet Earth is the first school, it's the first healer, it's the first economic venture, it's the first in everything, it's the first lawgiver, it's the first governor, it's the first in everything. So that, and it is our obligation when we articulate this in a conscious mode, it's a further extension of this, but the reality is in the community itself, in its nourishing process, and that's the difficulty. Say, the corporation. Sometimes I've spoken to corporation people that or can get concerned over their relation of corporation and commercial life to the society or to the environment and so forth. And I just tell them, how do you think you can succeed if the great corporation goes bankrupt? You are a part of the Great Earth Corporation. And this Great Earth Corporation is not self-exhausting, but self-enriching. Why don't you learn from the Earth process how to run a corporation? I came across something not long ago. It was a story of an Indian whose name was Reuben Snake, a rather large person. He did so much for his tribe. I'm not sure exactly which tribe it was, but he was talking with someone and they were venturing on something of monumental import. And the other person was reflecting on it. He says, "Dear, this is something awesome to try to do, and here's you and me, and we are nothing. And we must be very foolish to even think of such a thing." The old Indian, a gruff voice, says, "Yeah," but he says, "but we'll find good companions on the way." And so, in my own life venture, I found good companions on the way. And from moment to moment, the number has gathered until it seems almost limitless, the number of good companions.